It's not in the form we want it to be in, is it? We want it to look like a times x minus h quantity squared plus k. So we have to complete the square again. To get it in vertex form, you complete the square, if necessary. Okay, so we need, in front of the x squared, what do we need? In order to complete the square, we need a 1 in front of the x squared, right? We need a 1 in front of the x squared. So, okay, you could divide both sides by 2. Remember, that's how we did it back in the first section? But then you have f of x divided by 2, which is kind of a bummer. We want f of x by itself. So another way to do this would be to factor out the 2 from just the first 2 terms, because those it's the first 2 terms, the x squared term and the x term that we're completing the square on. So you would factor the first step then, if you don't have a 1 in front of the x squared, factor out the 2, or the a in general, right? A being 2 in this case. So if you do that, you get 2 times what? And you leave the 23 out of it. So 2 times what? Well, factor a 2 out of x squared, what's left? So x squared minus 8x. You are not factoring out the x. You're not factoring out the GCF, just the leading coefficient, which is 2, and just from the first 2 terms. So you leave the 23 out of it. And so it's x squared minus 8x that we're going to complete the square on. Okay? It's x squared minus 8x that we're going to complete the square on. All right, so what's the process for completing the square? So what do you do with the minus 8? Yeah, or multiply by 1/2, right? So what's 1/2 of negative 8? So you write that down. And then what do you do with the minus 4? You square it and you add it, right? You square it and you add it right like that. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So the square is completed. However, you haven't compensated. You need the net effect of what you added to be 0, right? Now here's the tricky bit that you have to get used to, and then it's not tricky anymore. What did you really do? What did you really add? What did you really add? Everybody look up here. Look at what I'm pointing at. It's 16 inside the parentheses, but what did you really add total to the right side of that equation? Let me say this and see if you believe me. You really added 32. You really added 32. Does everybody believe that? Yeah, because it's really multiplied by 2. This whole thing is multiplied by 2. You really added 32. So what do you have to subtract right back off again? On the outside, you have to subtract off 32. Okay? All right, so that makes it, okay, 2 out in front, and then x squared minus 8x plus 16, what does that factor to be? X minus 4 quantity squared, right? And then what's 23 minus 32? Yeah, so minus 9 on the outside. What's the vertex? 4, negative 9. What's the axis of symmetry? AOS. X equals 4.